Welcome to Tech for Good with Bethnal Green Ventures. My name's Paul Miller, and it's wonderful to be joined today by Lily Kajuk-Pakjus, who's co-founder and COO of RideLogix. Hello, Lily.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
No problem. So, tell us a little bit about RideLogix. What does RideLogix do, and why is that important?
Yeah, absolutely. So RideLogix is an inventory optimization platform, and it improves retailers' store replenishment, so logistic processes, by shifting away from the usual bulky weekly deliveries to smarter, more of daily micro replenishments. So this might sound very complicated. So to simplify it, what we really do is we ensure that retailers have the right stock in the right stores at the right time.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about that. So why is that a problem? Because you'd think they'd have got it sorted, to be honest. But why is it a problem for them? And also, why is it an environmental problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you would think that retailers would really know where to put their inventory and where it will sell, but actually, it's not as simple as it sounds, especially when you have a number of different stores within a city. So what usually happens is you might have one store of a retailer, let's say somewhere around Oxford Street, and then a few miles down the road, you might have a store from the same retailer, let's say like somewhere around Bond Street or even Stratford or Westfield. And it is actually extremely hard to predict which items will sell where when we're talking about such level of close proximity between stores. And this is really a double-edged sword for retailers. So what happens is if you run out of stock, you're missing out on sales. This is quite obvious. But the less obvious one, and also from an environmental perspective, is that if you have too much stock in some of your store, it doesn't sell, which means it will go to waste. A lot of retailers are at the moment focused on fixing the out of stock problem. And one way that they're actually doing that is simply by overproducing. So trying to have everything everywhere all the time. And I think you can appreciate that that just exacerbates the waste problem. So this is really where we fit in. We're trying to make this process a lot smarter and making sure that you only put the stock that you really need and it will really sell in the right places, so it does so.
That's fantastic. So let's switch a little bit a bit to you. So tell us a bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? What did you do before starting RideLogix? And is this something you've always wanted to do? When you were younger, did you think you were going to start a Tech for Good business?
Oh God, I think I've said this to you before, but I feel like I've lived many, many lives in my one life. But to start from the beginning, and I'll try and keep this short. So I was born and raised in Bulgaria during a very interesting period historically, let's call it that. So I was actually born behind the Iron Curtain, as some people have bluntly put it. To be honest, entrepreneurship wasn't really something that I was surrounded by. It was generally a tough time for everyone within the country. People were trying to really cover their basics to make ends meet. So thinking of something like entrepreneurship, which involves high levels of risk, it was just not what it was advertised to children. We were very much taught about, focus on getting a stable job, a job that everybody will need even during a recession in order to be able to feed your family. So no, I can't say that I grew up with entrepreneurship. As part of my childhood, but I did want to do business, and I think it started. I have some of my earliest memories of thinking about businesses when I was at home and setting up a bookshop and literally just taking the books from my parents' bookshelves and just pretending and playing that I have a bookshop, and I was asking my dad questions such as, why would I not just put really low prices and then everybody will be buying my books?
Okay, yeah.
So I think that was my first attempt at being an entrepreneur. But really, once I came to the UK, I actually studied accounting and finance. So I went with a very stable, very secure career path, moved into consulting, then into finance with investment banking at Goldman Sachs, where I was really starting to get really good exposure to what it is like to actually think about growth opportunities for really large corporations. So at investment banking, I was predominantly working with some of the largest organizations in the world. So I thought, wow, that is exciting, but it just felt a bit too grand for me to have any sort of an impact. So I was like, okay, I'd rather work with smaller sized organizations, but still with management teams, which is what led me to move into private equity. So I was myself an investor for a few years. and gain fantastic experience. I mean, it was really great. I was talking directly to CEOs, CFOs about their growth strategies, the problems that they were facing, operational, strategic, and really trying to have as much impact as possible in supporting them. And naturally, I think I just started asking myself, can I be on the other side of the table? You know, what would it take? What did it cost for me to be that person? I feel like I can be that person. And that's really what prompted me trying to have this new life of being an entrepreneur. And obviously starting RideLogix with my husband was quite instrumental to me taking the step, even though it might sound riskier from a entire family perspective that we both quit our corporate jobs. For me, it just felt like I had the right partner next to me that they will always support me and be like, yeah, you know, okay, if this doesn't work out, you know, it's fine at the end of the day. Like, we've got a plan B.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that, because obviously you and Serhat are married, but what was it that inspired you to start RideLogix specifically? You know, what was the story of going from, okay, we want to do something to RideLogix specifically?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it did start, but we wanted to do something. So we already come to the conclusion that we feel we would be a good fit together, personality, but also skill set wise. We have quite complementary skill sets. And we went on a thought journey initially of like, what could it be? You know, we should really be smart about this and leverage our existing knowledge and experiences. So for Serhat, that meant staying closer to supply chain and logistics field, because that's something he's done for so long. And for me, it was focusing on something that is more around software, operating models and business models that are software, but also consumer focused. So that is it. That's all we knew. We didn't know anything else. So we started thinking about it. We started going on long walks around London. We started doing lots and lots of research. And we were like, okay, it's got to be retail. So let's try and talk to retailers. What are their problems? We managed to get a few interesting conversations. But also during that time, as we were walking the London streets, we were thinking, okay, well, there are these things that keep on popping up everywhere that are called e-cargo bikes. And it was the first time we had seen them. And with Serhat's experience in logistics space, he was like, oh, that's really quite an interesting new mode of transportation, because actually about a quarter of the vans in London are about half full. It's completely inefficient way of using resources. There's only going to be more and more vans coming into the city, even if you're trying to regulate them out with the increase in e-commerce. It's only bound to be. So we felt like there was just something there. There was something that we could do with this new inflection point of having this technology. And this was the initial kind of seed of RideLogix.
So it was literally walking around, like sort of
literally walking around, yes,
and spotting this as a problem.
Well, we spotted the opportunity. The problem very much came from talking to customers. Okay. So I think you know very well that even with the accelerator program which we joined, we had one idea of, you know, what we were going to do with this, and it revolved very much around shipping goods from store from e-commerce perspective. But the more conversations we had with retailers, we identified that this was more of a nice to have. It wasn't a burning problem. So we did pivot, and we now pivot into something that we believe is a burning problem for a lot of retailers, and we see it the more conversations we have.
So tell us a bit more about how you think RideLogix could have that positive environmental impact. Now you really understand the what's going on in there. I mean, we've now brought in the fact that you're using e-cargo bikes to move this inventory around. And that's obviously like much lower emission than vans and sort of big trucks coming into London. But how do you think the software could have a positive environmental impact?
Yeah, so it is the right way to think about it. Exactly, it's two components to RideLogix. So you have the software component, and then you have the actual deliveries. So from a software component perspective, it's very much about the inventory optimization. As I mentioned earlier in the conversation, what a lot of retailers are trying to do right now is just have everything everywhere at all times. And that results in absolutely shocking statistics. I think one of the most disturbing ones that I've read is that about 30% of clothes that are produced are never worn and just discarded and end up in landfills. So we want to change that. For us, this is it. If you're becoming smarter about where you're placing your products, then you don't have to produce that many to begin with. So further up the supply chain, you're just going to have much, much leaner inventory that you can work with and still actually end up having higher sales. So this is what the software component does. The delivery component for us is very important because we don't want to contribute to further congestions and emissions in cities. So we only work with zero emission vehicles. At the moment, we are entirely using e-cargo bikes, which are just a much faster, cheaper, and environmentally much friendlier way of transporting goods within urban cities like London.
So, and you know, all of this is up and live and working now. And actually, one of your first customers is Holland Barrett, which lots of listeners in the UK will know about. Can you tell us a bit about like what they're getting out of it and what you're doing with them?
Yeah, absolutely. We started working with Holland Barrett about May of last year, so May 2024. And we started with a small pilot project, so about 10 stores, and just proving that operationally we can do what we're talking about. Because for retailers, it is actually really, really hard to tell them, I'm going to do things differently to what you're currently doing. That they don't want to hear that. So we started with a small project. We identified that we are, firstly, able to move the goods in a very fast and in a very cost-efficient way. So that's the e-cargo bikes component. But we also proved to them that by moving the right stock, it actually does increase sales. So this is what one side of the equation that they're getting out of is that they are actually increasing their sales, they're increasing their availability metrics at a much lower cost to what it would cost them to do it in absolutely any other way. But they're also doing that in an environmentally friendly way. They are a retailer that is very much focused on sustainability. We have these conversations very often, and they are very proud to say that they've moved all of these goods, using e-cargo bikes.
Fantastic. And what's the longer term goal for RideLogix? I mean, obviously you're trying to scale up the business, get new customers and so on. And I guess also I'll bring this up because I think people will assume that everything's moving to e-commerce, but actually, physical retail is still the vast majority of sales in most developed markets, as I understand it. So how do you think that's going to change over time? So what are you trying to achieve? And then how do you think that the environment that you're working in is changing?
Yeah, so let's talk about the environment first, maybe, because I think this is very, very interesting topic. Everyone and lots of people are focused on e-commerce. Clearly is growing at a much faster rate than physical retail. What I think people forget when it comes to e-commerce, that at the end of the day, it's still moving goods from one place to another, and it's still very much moving goods within a city. So this is where we come in. What is really the big vision for RideLogix? We think of ourselves as becoming the inventory optimization platform for anyone who moves goods into or within a city. So yes, our software very much focuses on making sure that the goods go into the right place at the right time. But also when we think about the delivery component, we orchestrate that in a very smart in a very smart way in which we're optimizing the logistics component as well. So it's not just the inventory that's optimized, it's the logistics that is optimized as well. So once you start moving goods into the city, there are still so much better and faster and smarter ways in which you can do it, rather than just having one van, two vans, or big trucks coming from the middle of the country and shipping goods in a not particularly efficient way. So I do think RideLogix can cover anything and everything that's moving within a city.
Yeah, that's great. Switching gears a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what you enjoy about running a Tech for Good venture. You've been doing this for a couple of years now. What do you like?
I'd say the part that excites me the most and helps me get out of bed every morning is the vision. Is the vision of, I will be able to one day say that we have removed vans off the streets because we're now moving things in a much more efficient way with e-cargo bikes. I will be able to say that landfills have hopefully decreased over time and goods aren't thrown away without being used or utilized in any way. So it is grand, and the reality is probably some of it isn't even measurable in the way that I imagine that it can be. It won't be as tangible, but it's definitely what drives me to be able to say I have contributed, even if a little bit, to something better.
And what don't you like so much? What's been tough? What's been difficult about running a venture?
Everything's difficult about running a venture. Absolutely everything. I'd say probably the thing that is the toughest about running a tech for good venture, though, that we have found is being able to sell to customers entirely on the sustainability component. And as much as I believe that, profits and sustainability are very much interlinked, and investing in tech for good is simply smart. I truly believe that. And it's the reason why we're building a business in this way. But when you're selling to customers, being able to sell this is good for you, for us, and for the environment is just not the way to sell. It just falls on deaf ears still.
Yep. And so you make a much more conventional sell, don't you? I mean, I've seen this from the other side. It's basically like this is the return on investment for you.
Exactly. It's entirely focused on the money.
By the way, there's all this sustainability benefits.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And I really wish it wasn't like this. And we still, the conversations would probably still go in the exact same way. But I would say it just probably hurts me a little bit that is there's so much talk about, the impact that we have on the environment. And things I truly believe, have gone in the right direction and will continue to go in the right direction. So that's why it almost saddens me sometimes to not be able to use that as a reason why someone should use our product.
Yeah. That's great. And if you were to give someone some advice, if you like, about starting a tech for good venture based on what you've learned so far, if they're literally just starting out, they're going for those walks around London at the moment, thinking of what they want to do. What advice would you have for somebody in that position?
There are probably two things that come to mind. One is focused on the sustainability component, and the other one is focused more on entrepreneurship in general. So focusing firstly on the tech for good venture type of entrepreneurship, I'd say it is extremely important that what you're fixing is a problem. And that's true for any entrepreneurship, but it is just that much more true when you're talking about tech for good. You can't simply forget that people pay for you to fix their problems. They won't pay you for any other reason. So the two things very much need to be linked. And as much as you want to go and fix the world and make it a much better place, if you're selling, you really need to have a reason why the customers are buying your product. On the overall, just being, starting an entrepreneurial journey, this might not be a very popular advice, but it's something that definitely worked for me. And I think for Serha is having some stability in your life when you're starting a venture is important. And for us, for example, that was having at least some level of financial stability. Trying to make ends meet when you're just starting a venture and thinking, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to, feed myself, let alone if you have children, or dependents on how you're going to take care of them. If you don't stress yourself out with these things and you know that this is taken care of, you can now invest 100% of your energy in doing what is already really hard, starting a venture. Yeah. But trying to split your energy between trying to pay your bills and starting a venture, I think is just really, really hard.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Lily, for joining us today. That's, really, really interesting stuff.
So, thank you so much for having me, Paul.
Great. If you've got suggestions for guests or topics we should be covering on Tech for Good, do get in touch. And if you're thinking of starting a Tech for Good venture and looking for investment, don't forget to check out bethnalgreenventures.com to see whether we might be able to help. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening and goodbye.